He's on his way. Yeah. Give him a few seconds.
The doctor's paid for this month.
The what?
The doctor's paid for this month. You could just not pay it. That's not paying. Tardy. Just won't give him a check.
I'm sorry. Oh.
We could probably get through that first portion. Call the meeting to order. Who took the gavel away?
That's me.
And for an invocation.
Father, we thank you for a beautiful day. We thank you for the sunshine. We thank you for strength to do what you called us to do. We thank you for this meeting, what to do for the city. Pray your wisdom, direction, favor in all things. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
There are, we'll also be removing the confidential business data executive session.
We'll move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
There's been a motion by Commissioner Lamberts, a second by Commissioner Wentz to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Moving on to public comments. This is the time where citizens are encouraged to speak publicly. We request that you state your name and address, speak respectfully, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Are there any public comments tonight? None online. Seeing none, we will move on to proclamations, recognitions, presentations. It's a public hearing, CDBG closeout. The public hearing is now open. Are there any public comments on this item?
Amanda, do you want to get a recap on the?
Yeah, I can. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Amanda Horn with the North Central Regional Planning Commission, and I just want to congratulate you guys on the closeout that's happening now for your LA project. There was some things, a lot of unexpected things that came up, but it was dealt with and it looks really good now. So I hope you guys can enjoy it for the next many decades to come. Now is the time for any public comments. If you guys have anything that you'd like to say, whether for or opposed to the project. It was for the improvements to the sanitary and storm sewer in the downtown commercial district of Concordia for grant number 20 PF 022 through CDBG. Most of the time we don't have any comments. But again, I just want to congratulate you guys. It went longer than expected, but it is now officially closed. And as of tonight, hopefully, we will be putting that one to bed and starting up with the new one for the fire department. So we're really looking forward to doing that with you guys, and I'm looking forward to get that one rolling. If there's no comments, I think the public hearing could be closed officially.
We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. The public hearing is now closed.
Okay, and then there's just one other thing with that comes documentations now that the public hearing is officially over. There's just a few of them that the mayor would need to sign. It's the contractor's release form, certification of completion, compliance reports, and final payroll reports. And those are all needed in order to officially close it out through CDBG and to put everything to bed.
Let's do those now so that you can go, or let's do those after the meeting and then.
I would prefer to do it now if possible, so that I can get those sent through to CDBG as soon as we're able to. If that's going to be a problem, I'm happy to get them done later.
We can sign that.
Thank you for your help too on the way.
You are so welcome. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys. You guys are easy to work with, and it's been good.
Sorry. All right. You guys need to sign them? Okay.
Was there any questions for me at all on the project? Okay,
Thank you. We'll go ahead and let our next item happen while they're signing. They should be done here in a moment. So our next item is the Doyen Field Turf Project.
Commissioners, we have Eric Nolan, Cloud County Community College baseball coach, here to visit with us, and then Chris Atkins, our Parks and Rec director, is on Zoom. He's at a conference this week.
So I'm here on behalf of a committee of people who collaborated to put together a plan to add infield turf at Doyen Field. We've been working on it for about the last month or so, a little bit longer than that, and have collaboratively come together with different entities in the community to put together a plan for it. What it would be is turf on just the infield portion of Doyen Field. So Doyen Field is the northeast field of the Concordia Sports Complex. It's the home of Cloud County baseball, Concordia High School baseball, Concordia American Legion baseball, and then we also play some K2 games on the field as well. It's owned by the city, and so we've been working in collaboration with the city. We've also had some input from USD, as well as Amber and our athletic director, Matt Bouchard, and have a pretty good plan in place to try to make it happen. So biggest reason is, there's a lot of reasons. There's turf fields kind of popping up all over the place, and as I've gotten, every year that goes along, it seems like as we recruit players, there's some that have never even played on dirt before. Every year our players get worse and worse at field maintenance because they don't have to anymore, because most of their high schools are turfed. And so, but there's a lot of good reasons. And, we spend a lot of time at it. To be able to do a college level facility the right way requires a ton of time and money and effort. And so we estimate we spend almost 80 hours a week in addition to what the city provides out of the field on maintenance of the field. And also the cost savings of turf as well. So to put turf down on the field, you'd be saving on water, you'd be saving on dirt, you'd be saving on clay, you'd be saving on chalk, you'd be saving on fertilizer, you'd be saving on grass seed. And since it's a city field, those are a lot of costs that the city already incurs. And so if it really makes sense for anybody, it makes sense for the city, because not only do you get a turf field, you also reduce a lot of costs. And so I don't know the exact number of what the infield portion of that exact field or what money goes into that. But if it's a few thousand, I'd probably estimate $3,000 to $5,000 a year once you add up water and all of the supplies. If you save that over the course of time, you add that up, and your contribution is basically made back in savings as well, and you have a turf field. So the cost is huge too. And appearance of a field of a nice college ballpark. It's different now. There's 18 teams in our conference, and 12 of them have turf fields. So this isn't anything we'd be beating the curve on. It's something that it's almost not a matter of if, it's kind of a matter of when in my mind. And so every year we've had to pay places to go play on their turf fields because of rainouts. In 2019, we had our first 34 games on the road because of snow and rainouts. And just a few weeks ago, we had to go pay Emporia State to go play at Emporia because of rainouts on our field. And so makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. The last thing is opportunity. It's got to be the biggest recreation facility in town. It's used year round. I benefited as a kid. It's kind of ironic. I was on it as a K-18 player. I played on it as American Legion, played on it as a high school player, I played on it as a college player here in this town. And now I'm getting to go to work and coach on the field every single day. And so if there's anybody in town that should be a champion for the project, it's me. I've spent a good amount of my life out there, and there's also a heck of a lot of headaches and maintenance out there. To do a natural grass field right, it requires a ton of time, a ton of effort. And honestly, the field now, it's good from afar, but it's far from good, to be honest. And it's kind of a slow fall. There's not enough time and money to do it right. There's a reason why professional teams have full grounds crews to maintain their field. When we went to Hutch last week, there was 3 guys there to do all the work and maintain it perfectly. They're one of the other 6 that have a natural grass field. Yesterday we were at Cali, and they had a full turf field, the infield, the outfield, everything. It rained hard for an hour from about 4 to 5 o'clock in the 4th inning. We sat down in the dugout, we watched it rain, it stopped raining, and we went back out and played and finished the game. So it's an absolute no-brainer. We've done projects at the ballpark over the years. The fence is the most recent one. The scoreboard out there is one as well. The bleacher project has been good. And all of those projects we've collaborated on to come together with a plan and kind of share the costs. And it reduces, everybody gets a nice product at a significantly reduced cost. The funding for this, we're looking at it being like anything. There's different levels. Do you want the bullpen done? Do you want the extension of the infield a little bit? Do you want a concrete mound or a portable mound? The base, you're probably looking at $350,000, and if you want to do it right, then maybe up to $500 at the top. With that, I think our funding plan is really good, and I think the college is prepared to carry the load and do some of the heavy lifting on that, knowing that we put a lot of time into that field as well too. So it started with a $25,000 donation. We've got some awesome alumni at the college that played baseball, and they gave to the indoor facility that we built 4 years ago, and want to continue to see things happen. And started us off with $25,000 there. We've applied for some grants, and our hope we just were awarded $30,000 from the wind farm, and we're hopeful to continue to get more there. And then we're asking for support from the entities, and then we believe our alumni will continue to step up to finish the project off. So Really just here requesting you guys' support for the project. I think we're all willing. We have a great group of people together working on it to continue to put together a plan for funding and make the place a point of pride in the community, something that we can all be proud of. There's people that come in all the time. I mean, I have some specific numbers in here, but we had camps and brought 200 kids in for camps and tournaments and from 23 different communities to Concordia. I do it for a living. We go to a different field every day, and that's what you show up and you look at their field and you make an opinion of the place. And our own players do it, and they're kind of quickly realizing they didn't pick Cloud for the facility, to be honest, because they go around, they see a full turf field here and a full turf field here. And so we need to upgrade, and it can be an awesome thing for all the entities, and everybody gets it at a significantly reduced cost because we work together to collaborate and cut costs that way. So are there any questions for me on the project?
No, I appreciated the collaboration and the strategic planning that you guys all attended. I heard that went really well. And, the announcement of the $30,000 gift was really nice from the county too. So you really are giving an all community effort here, which is great.
Our next steps are to go before the Board of Education and the College Board of Trustees to ask for their commitments as well. So we do plan to go there, and it's kind of nice to have everybody here supporting us. I know Quentin's on Zoom, Amber's here from the college as well. Tonight, I know this is a discussion item, so we're not asking for formal action, but we are asking for consensus that you would support us allocating 25,000 from Special Parks and Rec and 25,000 from CIP for a total of a $50,000 contribution, provided that we can raise the rest of the funds to actually go do the project. And then that would allow us to go forward and share with the other boards that we do have this funding commitment from the city, provided we can finish the project here as a collaborative effort.
And I just wanted to add that this is really just a great opportunity for our local entities to come together and pool our resources for the overall good of the community. And, why these students choose Cloud, they choose it for Eric and the program that he's built. And so to be able to have the facilities start to mirror the esteem and the level of play of our program would be really great. We did take this to our Cloud County Community College Foundation Board last Thursday night. They voted to put $50,000 towards the project as well. It will go to our Board of Trustees this coming Tuesday night. And asking them for a commitment also of $50,000. And so I just really appreciate the opportunity for us to come and speak to you all, and the opportunity to work with Amy and Quentin on this project to come together and pool our resources. So thank you.
I know when we were talking about the plaza, we've also been talking about the ball fields being part of economic development and the importance of bringing people to town, tournaments and things of that nature. So I think with the investment that we've been making out there, this makes sense to me to continue investing in that facility.
Eric.
Yeah.
When would the completion date, do you have a start date? Are you going to raise all the money first? I think it's a great project, but
Yeah,
I was curious timeline.
Yeah, we're hopeful that we can begin to move dirt in October or early fall, sometime in the fall. Kind of depending on when we can get on the schedule of the turf company. I think we're pretty optimistic the funding could come together and in that time to where we could begin to get bids and get it on the schedule for somebody in the fall.
So then it would be ready to go in the spring?
Yeah, for both the high school season and the college season, and then the following would be for some for the city games. One of the cool benefits, I think, is just today we're out there and the high school's practicing on the other field and we're practicing on our field, and if we were to get turf, it eliminates all the pre-practice work, the post-practice work. Every one of our players has a job that they do on the field for 20 minutes afterwards. Some of them are picking up dirt clods, some of them are raking the edges. They'll have an area of the field. There's 40 different jobs. It's really the only way we can make it work. If you have turf, the minute our practice is over, we come off, the high school comes on. Everybody gets to use it a lot more. The high school probably won't have to use the other field very often. In the city, in the summers, it frees the city staff up to be able to put more time into other fields, and may even potentially be able to reduce some staff out there. If you have one field you don't have to use at all. Literally the lines are in the turf. You don't have to chalk it. You don't have to do anything. You just show up and you play and you leave when you're done. And so should increase usage for everybody. So.
I'd just like to add that, we've talked about this for probably about the last year and a half. It's come up, and it's always been more of a dream. And especially with the work of Eric's done here in the last couple of months, and the groundwork and the plan that we have moving forward, especially with all the grants and everybody working together, it's really come to a great possibility. And just commend him to where the groundwork that he's done and everybody else is working together to be a good project and possibly come to fruition.
Any comments? And just would we have your support to move forward with fundraising? And then if we did, would that be okay to say the city has committed those funds if we get that far?
Agreed.
Yeah, fine with me. Sounds like a good plan.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Many hands make light work.
Okay, we'll move on to our next discussion agenda item, which is the de-annexation policy.
Okay, so on rare occasions, we will get what's called a request for the de-annexation. They're very few and far between. Generally, we're annexing things, so we're bringing things into the city. A de-annexation will be essentially taking something, taking it out of the city. Did some research to kind of find out surrounding communities, bigger communities even that have done something like this. The general answer I got from everyone was, no, we've never done this. Even Sedgwick County, who has quite a bit of, they have a very large office there. The guy who's in charge said, I've been here for 20 years and we've never done that. So it took some homework. State statutes give us a little bit of guidance on it, not nearly as much as they do with regular annexation. But you will see, I did provide a memo and on here as well. What we need to do is adopt a policy regarding the annexation. There's a lot of things that go into it. This is actually, in my opinion, more time consuming and more labor intensive than what an annexation would be. So there are some expenses that come with it by statute. What happens is, I can run through this real quick with you guys, is that a petition by the individual who owns the land that is requesting the de-annexation would have to be made. I was able to find a boilerplate petition for de-annexation, which I will kind of mold to what we would need. Would keep that on file, and I don't have a problem providing a copy of that to whoever would want to start this process. Then what happens is we have to publish in the newspaper at least 20 days prior to a hearing that there's going to be a hearing regarding de-annexation. So there's going to be some fees there. There's time and money there, which I can go over here in just a bit. Then the petition can be brought to the city commission. Per statute, it can be brought to the city commission, or it can be brought to the planning commission first. If it's brought to the planning commission, whatever decision the planning commission makes then has to be ratified by the city commission. It's an extra step. It can be done. It doesn't have to be done. It can actually be brought directly to the city commission. When I say brought directly to the city commission, what I mean is that hearing would be before you guys as opposed to before the planning commission. And then the planning commission sends their decision on it. Then what we would have to do is, if it was brought to the city commission, after we have to have this public hearing, the person asking for the de-annexation would essentially plead their case, for lack of a better term. Anybody who is for or against it could come. Generally, they will have a vested interest in it. We have to kind of decide amongst ourselves if that's something that we're willing to support. After you do that, there's more of a process and more paperwork that comes after that. It's going to take some time and some labor as well. If you guys ratify it, then what needs to be done is essentially we have to adopt a resolution doing so, and then we have to file with the Register of Deeds. Well, let me go back here. That stuff would be drafted, but then what we need to do, there's not a lot of guidance in the statute, but the next step I am suggesting is that we would go to county commission and tell them this is what's going on, and this is what we are proposing. If we do ratify this, to say, hey, go ahead and would you accept this back into the county? And at which point in time, then we draft a resolution and then something that's called an order of exclusion. I called around to some attorneys I know who do property law, also called around to some register of deeds, and the general consensus was, what's an order of exclusion? Because we don't do de-annexations ever. So I'll have to draft something like that. Essentially, what it would say is, here's this piece of property, it would have the address, it would have the legal description, and, on this day, it was chosen to be annexed into the county. There's, a lot that goes into it. And after that, essentially what we're looking at, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself again here, is that after all of that would be done, then potentially we're gonna have to redraw boundaries and redo the maps for the city, because we are taking a piece of the city out. So we would have to redraw those. There's some added expense there as well. So in my memo here, I did, and I guess before we go into the process and what the costs would be, does anybody have any questions regarding what?
I guess my question, like going before the county, I mean, what potential hardships do they incur by, because you're not actually accepting it back into the county, it's already in the county.
Yeah, the reason why I did it is really and truly, it would be kind of a professional courtesy to let them know, hey, heads up, there's a piece of land that's going back. And, it could be, who knows, it could be 1 acre, it could be, 100 acres, whatever.
We don't maintain the service road going by there now, correct?
No,
Okay.
I don't believe so. Really and truly, and what happens with a lot of the times with this stuff is, and it's an argument that a lot of people have is, we're providing those services there. So let's say somebody comes in and goes, I want a de-annexation. It's like, well, we're providing water and electric and all. Essentially, we cut all that off. You're not getting that benefit, not being in the city then. So a lot of the times what you're looking at is probably property that isn't getting any of those services anyway.
I just want to say that the professional courtesy too is that typically I think ambulance services charge money, and so there's some township taxes that are charged different if you're in the county as opposed to if you're in the city. So some of those charges would change too. So it would be important to alert the county commission, have them kind of ratify and acknowledge that it's happening, and then the formal recording of the register of deeds would then trigger the county clerk, county treasurer, and county appraiser to make adjustments if they need to.
I would just ask for them to basically okay it. Then it is filed with the Register of Deeds. There is a charge for filing with Register of Deeds per page. There's, like I said, there's some costs that are involved. In the memo here, I've kind of outlined that, in my opinion, it's a process that is not, and it was a consensus when I spoke to other communities as well, is that this isn't a process that we encourage. I kind of discussed with them, well, what if, you guys have administrative fees for things? You're like, oh yeah, we have fees for everything. So in looking at this, I do propose, if you jump down to 2, the hard numbers here are, publication fee for the newspaper, we're looking at about $200. Because it's going to be, I generally try to keep these things as short as possible when we're publishing, because it does cost money per word. But, some of these you have to put a good amount of information in. There's a good possibility we're gonna have to put in the legal description, all sorts of stuff. So we're looking at probably about $200 for publication.
And just, I would, after we put this in, I would say that we've thought about it, we reread through the process, and it's a notice of publication with public hearing. Then afterward, we have to publish the ordinance that went into place. So I would honestly.
Yeah, that's true.
Request that this be increased to about $300 to cover both of those.
And I think we did discuss that. I apologize. It's not in my current memo. So we would need to do about $300 on that. Filing fee with the Register of Deeds, they do charge per page. Not knowing, because we're gonna have to attach the resolution. We're gonna have to attach this order of exclusion. So I think a conservative value on that's gonna be $150. And then so I did talk to Campbell and Johnson and told them kind of gave them a scenario and said, if we have to redraw these, resurvey, do all of this stuff, what are we looking at cost wise? I was told it would be right about the area of $500 to do something like that. So those fees right there are pretty hard and fast, in my opinion. And then in regard to an actual filing fee, my opinion was we do this per acre. So that someone who might come in and have some reason as to why they want to de-annex something and it's a larger piece, they're gonna have a little bit more skin in the game. I do propose that we do $100 an acre of land. The reason being is that, you know, there's a filing fee for everything, and I don't want us to necessarily encourage this kind of stuff. I don't want it to be prohibitive for someone who may have a good reason as to why they want to de-annex. But there's a lot of work that's gonna have to go into this on my part, on Stacy's part, on Amy's part as well. So I think that's fair. So then what we would have to go to is essentially, we don't have any policy regarding de-annexation because most places don't. So with a lot of help from Amy, we did get this a sample policy for discussion and for you guys to look at. We did put in here, then went over it, added some things, took some things out. And then actually we do need to, I think in your guys's packet that says a publication fee is 200, we would have to change that to 300. So that's kind of it's an interesting process simply because it's not used very often. And what we've had to do is kind of look at certain statutes. Some statutes, they sort of apply, they're regarding de-annexation. So we've had to, you know, you take from that and say, okay, this is how it needs to be done. So, you know, I'm hoping this is a rare occasion type of process, but it's good to have a policy so that we have kind of a roadmap to follow.
Just I think it'd be important to note, statutes outline certain considerations that you have to take into account. And if the requester wants to de-annex the property or exclude some property from the city solely because they don't want to pay property taxes, that can't be a reason. And at the same time, the city commission can't say, I'm going to deny your request solely because I'm worried about losing taxes. So those are major considerations, but we've outlined some other considerations there in the policy. And so tonight we'd love to kind of walk through that, answer any questions that you might have. This is a first reading policy, and then we'd like to bring it back to you at the next meeting for action.
And that is important to know, and the person petitioning would be made aware of that as well. Is that, you know, if you come in, essentially, like I was telling Amy, if I come in here and want to de-annex and I simply say, I just want to de-annex it so I don't have to pay taxes to the city. Well, if that's it, then you guys don't have to make a decision because essentially per statute, that doesn't count. So we can't take, nor can we take that solely into account and say, well, our decision's based on, we don't want to lose your tax revenue. Statute clearly states that we can't do that. So, you know, in section 1 of the policy here, you'll see it's just general statements, kind of just outlining what we have here, why we're doing this, a little bit of what, you know, de-annexation is. I think the focus we want to look at here are probably the policy considerations. I don't know if you want me to read all those to you word for word. But you know, I think it's important to know.
And a lot of these were taken directly from
Yes,
statutes as well.
Yeah.
Is there any way to add, I mean, to prohibit, you know, things like this, like if it's been developed, you know, you can't, or can you get that specific? Like there's no de-annexation.
We could, like, for instance, one of the considerations in here is if you're already served by water and sewer,
Right.
you can't be served by city water and sewer if you're not already located in sewer. And that's under another commission policy statement. So we refer to that policy. So that would be something for the commission to consider. Like Justin stated earlier, you probably could, but then we would have to cap that off and they would not be allowed access to it. Again, I don't know that anybody's going to want to go to that effort to do that, but that would be one thing.
Well, and I think you would have a strong argument if I come in here and I have a developed area and I'm like, I want to de-annex. You know, you can say, hey, listen, we have contributed to this. You are a developed part of the county. You're a part of the plan. You're a part of the comprehensive plan, the future plans we have. That's a strong enough argument right there, really and truly, to say this is not the best interest of the citizens or the city of Concordia.
And really, there's a lot
The
of-
burden lies on the petitioner, not the city.
That's correct. Yep. The burden lies on them to show you why de-annexation would be appropriate in that moment. So,
But even even in that situation, the city would still have the authority or right to deny that application just because it doesn't fit our plan.
Yeah, and that's a major part of it. The future land use plan, zoning, and just general planning for the future of the city in general really governs a lot of this, as it talks about in statute. We read a lot through the current comprehensive plan, looked at a lot of that. We looked back at, the city does have an annexation policy, and that was developed back in 1982. So looked at that too, and kind of used that to feed a lot of the crafting of this policy as well, thinking, okay, if it's coming into the city for these reasons, that should the same consideration be if it's going out of the city. And then it was referenced a lot too in the comprehensive plan as well as the statute. So yeah, planning and zoning and future planning really covers it.
So if we adopt this policy generally as is, and the petitioner makes their petition, we go through this process, and as a body, we vote no, how much of an explanation do we need to offer to justify that response?
There has to be something more than just, we don't want to lose it for the taxes. And I think that the reason that we wanted to craft this so that all the policy considerations were enumerated there is to give a guide for the commission to explain the reasoning on why we chose to allow this or why we disapprove the petition.
The number of situations in which I think this could be appropriate are minute, in my opinion, and I don't want it to become a slippery slope that anybody on the fringes then can just say, well, I might as well get out of here too.
You have, really and truly, you have one inappropriate consideration, which are
Property
taxes.
taxes, right?
But other than that, I mean, if you came back and said, you
They're
know what,
considered
we have a consensus that this is not in the best interest of the city. This is a part of the city as it is at this point in time. You know, there's a plan in place. We believe that
Then that's all sufficient.
that's all sufficient. Yeah. So in the policy considerations, I think that's a good roadmap kind of to assist you guys. You know, there's different things in here, you know, consideration shall include whether the public will suffer no loss or inconvenience by exclusion of the land. You know, also the petition for de-annexation shall not be granted for written objections filed with the city clerk at the time of or before the hearing by any owner or landowner adjoining will be proper party to petition but was not joined therein. So essentially, if somebody else comes in and says, hey, wait a second, they would, I mean, they essentially going to come to that hearing as well, and they're going to argue their case. Thankfully, things are going to be rare situations, but we do run the risk of, you know, an adjoining or an adjacent landowner saying, whoa, this happened, I'm going to lose something, I could lose service, or I'm supposed to be part of this plan too. So I mean, there's a lot of considerations that can be made as to if it's proper or not. There's just the one very important consideration that can't solely be used. So I think kind of went over the procedure with you guys already, and in that policy as well, it does outline the fee structure.
And the procedure is very well grounded in what the statutes require.
Yes, yes, it is. Yep. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions or anything?
On the fees, Justin, are those fees other than the filing fee, which says, you know, they have to pay that when they file? The rest of them, is the city bill them? They pay them direct? I mean, because.
Yeah, no, the filing fee and the publication fee would have to be paid up front. And then really and truly, the way I want to do this is so I don't want to bill them upfront for the filing fee for the Register of Deeds or any kind of outline, updates to the boundaries, because that may not necessarily happen. So, you know, if they come here, they pay everything and you guys find against them, they don't get the publication fee or the filing fee refunded. That's just how the system works. So, you know, the filing fee for the Register of Deeds and then the boundary updates would be something we would very likely, those last two things would very likely be something we would invoice later. But I'm of the opinion of we send that invoice upon payment, then that deed is filed. And then we update the boundaries. I don't want to do that and then wait for somebody to pay us, because having worked in municipal court as long as I have, getting people to pay us is not easy. So that would be stuff that before action was taken, they would have to pay those.
Could we modify the fees to make sure that we cover that if the city limit boundary update ends up being $650, I guess I would wonder about cost plus 10%, whichever is greater. So this is, it's $500 or cost plus 10%, the greater of the two. To help make sure that we're covering all of our costs. I also wonder about a minimum filing fee of $1,000 or $100 per acre, whichever is greater.
Okay.
I mean, these numbers work pretty well now, but if this is a policy, are we wanting to revisit this policy on an annual basis to make sure that the costs are in line with?
Well, and I suspect we will have to probably revisit it when Register of Deeds increases their filing fees, when publication fees increase. I mean, these things they're not gonna just stay at that.
I guess that's kind of what I wonder about a cost plus percent.
Okay.
That could be something that would save us some of that trouble at the time. I mean, understanding that the percentage is part of the labor that we're putting into it and doing the labor.
So you're suggesting where we have fixed dollar figures, did you say fixed figures or cost plus 10%, whichever is greater? Is that what you're saying? And then for the filing fee, it's $1,000 or $100 per acre, whichever is larger. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That's up for long term.
And somebody's gonna have to go along with the marker and color in all of the area until we decide to have city maps reprinted. So there's labor costs associated with that as well.
And this, most of the time what you're seeing are cities bringing land in, not.
Right, because if it's the plan, that's part of our master plan, it's part of the development.
Exactly. Any other questions?
I don't think so. I think we'd be ready next meeting.
Yep, okay, so what we'll do is adjust these, I'm sorry. Did somebody say something?
Marcia was starting.
No, that sounds good. Next meeting would be
Okay, great.
good to bring it to us.
So then we'll adjust those numbers and then we'll put it on the action items for next month. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Moving on to the action agenda, the minutes of the April 6th, 2022 meeting.
I moved to,
Marcia.
I moved to approve the minutes of the April 4th meeting.
Second.
And a motion by Commissioner Wentz, second by Commissioner Hash to approve the minutes of the April 6th, 2022 meeting. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Appropriation ordinance number 7.
I approve appropriation ordinance number 7. Move to approve, sorry.
Second.
And a motion by Commissioner Lambert, a second by Commissioner Hash to approve appropriation ordinance number 7. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Housing Authority appointment.
Ryan Carnes, a very productive member of the Housing Authority Board, has given his resignation, and this month's meeting was his last one. He's changed careers and he'll be out of town during the time we have meetings, so he knew there was no way at this point he could do it. He really hated to and hopes that he can come back someday. In the meantime, we did contact Devin Davis, who was had wanted to be named at some point, and he was brought forward to you last December, but you chose Melissa Loeffler, however you say her name. And anyway, he's still very interested in doing it, and we kind of talked to the board at the March meeting, and they all agreed that they would like to see him come on, so we would definitely recommend him.
I move to appoint Devin Davis to the Housing Authority for an unexpired term.
Second.
And a motion by Commissioner Hash, second by Commissioner Wentz to appoint Devin Davis to the Housing Authority for an unexpired term. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. CCLIP Surface Preservation Project K9 Highway.
The city has a CCLIP surface preservation project that's going to start October 1st. And the work's gonna be done by November 25th, 2022. Me, Amy, and Dawn held the bid letting, and we only ended up getting one bid from Hall Brothers. And as you can see, the bid came in a little higher than we estimated. And I think it's probably due to maybe gas prices and oil prices being higher than what they were originally. Staff recommends that we reject all bids and rebid later in the early spring of 2023 in hopes of getting more bids and possibly better prices. And I asked Juan to come and answer any questions that they all have that I can't answer.
And we think the project can hold up for another year or so before.
That section can.
Okay.
The next section that we've applied for, I would be leery of waiting on it, but we're gonna wait anyway, because it wouldn't be approved till the end of the year. There by the middle school, if you notice, that's breaking up a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily opposed to waiting. I'm just not also entirely optimistic that petroleum prices are going to reduce significantly in that time. So I don't know.
It's kind of a gamble.
Is there a time sensitivity for when we have those funds available? I mean, do they run out? And
Are they walking?
That is a 2023 fiscal year project, which for the state, that's for July 1st of this year to June 30th. As I understand, if you don't use them by June 30th of 2023,
right, so
They
there
do
is
lose.
yeah, we don't want that to happen either.
there's also been a change. And I know Amy and I had a little discussion on what population is. The state says you're at 4,800 and something. That's to your benefit, because if you're under 5,000, you only have to participate in 5% instead of 10. This one was already in, so they can change it, but the next one would be 5%. They use some kind of their state map, and now where they get the numbers for their state map, I don't know. But that's what they said their official was, so, but yeah, it's.
So if our population increases, then we're looking at contributing more to this project than we are currently.
If we're over 5,000, we contribute 10%. If we're under 5,000, we contribute 5%. So the 2020 census has us at 5,111. KDOT has us at about 4,800 people.
So if the project remains 300,000, then we'd be looking at an additional 15,000 we would contribute, right? And there's a reason I'm a social worker, not a.
Right, and so this year we had set aside 35,000 for design in our match is what we had set aside. We've already got sunk cost of 7,500 for the design. So let's say that we rejected bids today. Next year we would be eligible to go back and apply for this project again. And if KDOT still says that we're under 5,000 people at that point in time, then we would put together 5,000 toward it. So if prices stay the same, you're right, we'd be looking at approximately $15,000 that would be our local match toward that. And the design would already be complete.
You have to pay 100% of the design anyway. The state does not participate in the design. They do for when we go out and inspect the building.
Definitely a game. Do they refigure the population amount every year?
Pardon?
Yearly? Do they refigure that population amount yearly?
I don't
or is
know.
it based on the
I couldn't
census?
even, the lady that I worked with on setting these up, she said, we use the official state transportation map. Where we get the numbers for that, I don't know. So, as well, the internet and the census shows the difference, so.
If we choose to proceed with this project, we would pull the overage from the CIP project that we already chose to delay. Recall there was an alley mill and overlay that we chose to delay because we chose to proceed with the runway shortening. We took 30,000 out of that 212,000 allocated. So we would pull this 55,000 from that 212,000 as well. But staff recommendation is we'd like to see a few more bids. We'd like to see a little bit competitive. We'd hope that oil prices would go down. If we think that we're still going to end up at being that 5% instead of 10%, that would further save the city money. The payment can last one more year, so it might be a good idea. That's what that our recommendation.
Sure. I mean, they're all good.
So could this project and the one you were gonna bid next, or the one you were gonna apply for next year, could they be combined for 2024?
Yes, and as I understand it, you could get up to 300,000 for each one.
And then we might potentially realize some savings from comboing those projects and having them only have to set up once.
You'd save a totalization on one project, yes.
Plus the fact that we're under the 5,000. So would save us that extra money too.
Hmm. How confident are you in our ability to be awarded the additional project next year?
I met with a gentleman earlier this week, actually, and we went over it, and I mean, he seemed like we were a good candidate to get the next one, so I'm hopeful that we do get it, because I think it would be better just to go ahead and do them all at once, if we could put them together and just go ahead and get that whole section out of the way, and then instead of doing one section at a time and then having construction and all the traffic wrapping around it, and then having to go back and do the next section also.
If it goes well, it'd be great.
Yeah.
I think it's worth the gamble. I move to reject all bids with the intent of rebidding in spring 2023.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Hash and a second by Commissioner Wentz to reject all bids with the intent of rebidding in spring of 2023. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Still might be back.
You're welcome, sir.
It goes really well. So.
Yeah. Manager's report.
Mayor and Commissioners, just a few things for you. First of all, you see, you may have noticed driving down 6th Street, the demolition of the 2 houses is complete next to the Brown Grand, and it looks wonderful. We're really pleased with the work that Smith Construction did on that demolition. They really dressed up the site nice. They did a good job containing their equipment there. They cleaned up around the edges as we asked of them, and it seemed to work out really well. So we appreciate their work. Bruno's absence, the CDBG demolition project continues. I think I saw them starting on the house just east of the museum today, and that is the last house on the base bids. We are out to bid for 2 alternates because we did have some money left over, so we'll see how those bids come in to decide how to proceed with those a little bit later. We also have plenty of summer seasonal positions still open, so if you have nieces, nephews, children, grandchildren, if you have friends, even adults that are not working their primary job during the summer and need a little something extra to do, we are hiring still in the Parks Department as well as lifeguards. We're in desperate need of lifeguards. So staff has been having the Plan B discussion about what do we do if we don't have enough. And I know that we've been working through some modifications to make sure that we can still open and have programming, which is very, very good. So hopefully we'll have some answers for you. Then hopefully we also have a lot more applications and we won't have to go to Plan B. I think that's really all that I have for you this evening. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Staff reports.
I was just giving an update on the citywide cleanup, the load totals. Construction pit, we had 49 loads that went out to the construction pit of the county. We had 68 loads of tree branches, 25 loads inside pit, 13 loads of metal, and 14 loads of tires, which the total tire count was 713 tires.
A lot of junk.
Yeah.
Which is how many less mosquitoes?
A lot, hopefully.
Well, I mean, need moisture to have mosquitoes, so we're doing pretty well on that one, so.
I was just gonna give an update on the ARPA funds. As you recall, we were awarded $761,061, and we have spent $236,257 on the console purchase for dispatch and the alley project, the portion that went towards that. And the first reporting deadline is the end of this month, so getting that done, but everything's still going as planned. We have 524,800 left to spend. So we have it, as you know, so.
Anybody else? Mayor, commissioner comments. Marcia, can we start with you?
I don't have anything. It's nice in California.
Nice to do.
Check.
No, I don't have any.
I don't have anything.
I had some very positive feedback from the neighbors of the houses. There was some nerves about those coming down, and they were very pleased with the whole process. So very good. And that is all I have. So at this point, I'd entertain a motion for attorney or executive session.
I move that the city commission recess into executive session for consultation with an attorney for information deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship exemption KSA 734319B2 with Amy Lang and Justin Farrell in attendance, and reconvene in the city commission chamber at 6:45 p.m.
Second,
Been a motion by Commissioner Lambert, second by Commissioner Hash to move into executive session until 6:45 p.m. for attorney-client privilege. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Hand up for
No action was taken. At this point, we'll look for a motion to adjourn into study session.
So moved.
second,
Been a motion by Commissioner Lambert, second by Commissioner Hash to adjourn into study session. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned.
Okay, Mayor Commissioners, you have in your packet a draft or red line policy and a memo for the study session on purchasing policy update. Staff's been kind of discussing this for a couple of years now about spending limits. So right now, for the policy that was done, I believe, back in 2004 is when it was last updated. And the spending limits for staff right now, as the city manager has $5,000 spending limit, and then anything above and beyond that comes to the commission for consideration. Department heads have a threshold of $1,000. So what we're requesting with this review is to increase those thresholds. And what we're asking is to increase the department heads to 5,000 and increase the city manager to 20,000. I believe I included in the packet a survey that was done back in 2020 of other cities through the KCM listserv that shows what other thresholds are for other cities. Since that time, I was just visiting with the city manager in Junction City the other day, and they've since increased their limits to 5 and 25 now is where they're at. So there probably has been some changes in others too, but those just aren't reflected there. What we're finding is that since 2004, costs have increased. Inflation has happened since 2004. And I found it interesting. There's an inflation calculator online that I took a look at from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it shows that $1,000 purchase in April of 2004 would have cost $1,327 in March of 2018. and $1,529 in 2022. So that's like a 30% increase in inflation and spending, and we're definitely seeing that. So just some of the routine purchases that staff may have been able to do earlier without action by the commission is now exceeding those thresholds. So that's the primary reason for wanting to increase the spending thresholds. When we look at spending thresholds just here around the city, we know that the college and the community college and the USD have a little bit higher spending thresholds. I know when I was working for the school district in Salina, I had just under 20,000 at my desk as a threshold. We had 10 at the college. I know it's increased since then. So just being able to do the work that we need to do. And the staff have some examples of some of the daily purchasing that they do. We also have emergencies that tend to arise and require expenditure of funds beyond what's a threshold. Now we know that there's certain things that just seem way out of reason for us to take care of. So one of those crazy examples was when we called the emergency meeting a few years ago, and we had you take action on an emergency contract to repair an alley that had failed. That contract was, I think, Jeremy helped me remember, one of them was like $80,000, and then the very next one was like $100,000. Obviously, we aren't going to try to do those kind of things ourselves. But I know Eric had a recent example of an air compressor to fill their air tanks just in recent months. And that probably could have been considered an emergency, but we chose to wait and come to you to authorize purchase of that. We had an alternative, which was take a slower fill or go to Miltonville and get a fairly decent fill. So we had an alternative and felt like we could wait. But just having some of that initial spending authority would be helpful. We also, some of the changes that we're looking at too in, let's see, section 4, we talked about staying limit there, section 5, daily purchasing. So we have in there a spot for daily purchasing, and that talks about commodities. So in our mind, that's the consumable supplies that go pretty quickly. So that might be the fuel purchases, that might be chemicals that we purchase to regularly operate. So for example, Jeremy purchased chlorine, we purchased certain chemicals for the pool, for example. Those are eaten up pretty quickly. But there's also certain purchases that fall in between those immediately consumable supplies and heavy equipment replacement or planned projects. And I'd like for the staff to kind of describe what some of those examples are. But we'd like to take a look at those and see if we can authorize the department heads to spend what they need to that's already within their budget that you authorize every year. That's part of your budget book that gives the example in their operating budget how much they can spend for maintenance and repair. One of the things that's also in daily purchasing is from local vendors. So the way the policy reads right now is we can purchase those any of those items, those chemicals, that sort of things, as long as we purchase them from a Concordia company. Now we recognize that there are some things that we need to purchase that are not offered here locally. So we'd like to delete from local vendors there, recognizing that wherever we can, we're going to shop local, and there's a good reason for doing that to support our local businesses. We modified section 5B and 5C to create a new 5B, and that has to do with the requesting quotes. The 2004 policy allowed us to get verbal quotes, and we don't believe that that's in the best interest of the city. We believe that it's better to get written quotes from any vendors that we solicit. We recognize that there's certain times when we need to get quotes versus going out to sealed bid. And those are times when we have a very limited number of vendors. For example, if we've standardized on a certain vendor, or if the work that we're doing is so specialized, there might only be two or three vendors nationwide or in our region here in the Midwest that supply those things, it may be best just to call and get some quick quotes from them, as opposed to a construction project, for example, where we might have 3 or 4 local vendors that provide that construction project, then it makes sense to do the sealed bids. We also are looking at updating the competitive sealed bids to reflect the $20,000 requested spending threshold. And then competitive negotiations, we updated that to better describe how that procurement method would be used, which is typically used if we're going to go after a design professional or something of that nature. I also discussed a little bit about prioritizing purchases from local vendors as opposed to non-local vendors. And we talked about pros and cons of that. So there's some organizations that are public that might give, like, say, they would say, as long as a local vendor is less than 5% higher than a non-local vendor, you can go ahead and choose and recommend the local vendor. Sometimes that makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it makes sense to specify that local vendors could be given that advantage, but one of the challenges that we foresee is that going to scare away non-local vendors and then you don't have as many vendors bidding? And does that decrease your competition? So we weren't sure if we should include something like that or not, or just to have that unwritten discretion that we might choose to just go ahead and maybe not take the low bid, but choose a local vendor instead. So we were not really sure how to incorporate that. In the 2004 purchasing policy, and this is probably the section that challenged us the most, there was a specific procedure for purchasing vehicles and equipment put in there. And specifically, they requested that we, or required that we would come to you and hold a study session to review the vehicle specifications before we went out to bid. That can add 2 to 4 weeks to a bidding and equipment replacement timeline. And it also, we feel like, crosses that line between the policy budget work of the elected officials versus the administrative detailed operations work of the staff. And so we're proposing to just delete that completely. We would still go out to bid publicly for those type of items. We would still bring them back to you for consideration. We would still describe the basic specifications, but we don't know that it's really benefits anybody to have you help us choose paint color, or what kind of hitch it has, or the weight, or the type of the box, or the weight of the hoist, that kind of thing. That's what we kind of believe that we hire our department head experts for, to know what they need to do to complete their job. Then finally, section 6 and 7. One has to do with grant purchasing, that still remains the same. And then section 6. Here. Section 6, just in summary, makes sense, is that we basically try to use this as a guide and to be able to use this guide to explain to the vendors what our purchasing policy is if they request it, so if they try to challenge us on it. So would entertain just kind of a discussion on these items. We can go through line by line, ask questions.
Is there a way that we could just add in there that vehicles and equipment can't be purchased through A? I mean, not that you all would stretch the terms of what an ordinary purchase might be, but it could be a mower is an ordinary purchase. Well, yeah, but we still need to get the written quotes and not go through because you could potentially get maybe a type of mower for under $5,000 or.
Okay, so we're looking at section 5, methods of purchasing, and daily purchasing describes what can be done on a daily basis without commission approval. And so we just want a statement under there that vehicles and equipment are not included in that section.
Yeah, I think where we get into turmoil in our community about local purchases is typically about equipment and vehicles. Would you guys agree? So
Yes.
rather just to cover everyone, make sure you do get bids for that.
Yes, I think that's reasonable.
I think when you look at numbers within our budget, it may not seem as significant, but if you look at numbers within a local vendor's budget, it may be far more substantial. And so I think to make sure that we're giving them the opportunity to be a vendor, if nothing else, it's goodwill.
Absolutely.
I know we don't want something that says you can go back and, that a local vendor can have an opportunity to match, but I do recall some instances where maybe a bid was and then one of the vendors came back with some additional bells and whistles, and the other vendor perhaps didn't, they went off the bid sheet, so they didn't offer, and then the preference was given because of there were all these additional bells and whistles. Well, that's a point where you go back and say, is that something that you can offer as well? I guess that would be something I would hope that staff would do.
So, okay.
And I don't know how to write it. I don't know that you want it written in, just maybe just a matter of.
Because I think that there's a difference between allowing a local vendor, say, to match a price, for example.
Yeah.
Versus bid shopping, saying, well, I got this and these extras here, what can you do for me? So I think that walks a fine line right there. Okay. Yeah.
That being said, I don't want to scare away outside vendors, but I also want to keep local vendors. And there are people who have been involved with economic development that know far better than I do, that a dollar spent locally travels much more than a dollar spent out of town. So where it's 5%, I would not be opposed to increasing that threshold, because I do think it's so important to shop local. And I think we have fairly significant recent evidence of that, when shopping local was a lot more necessary because people weren't able to travel, and we saw what it did to our own budget. So I think that we do well when we take care of the people in our community, and I think knowing that that a box store in Salina is going to be able to sell me something a lot cheaper than the merchant can here in town, but there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think we need to take that into consideration too, that yes, it is more expensive, and we need to be good stewards of our tax dollars. But part of that is making sure that we maintain a vibrant, thriving community that has vendors to shop from.
Would you think that a 7% increase would be reasonable, or would you go as high as 10? What?
I thought rule of thumb always was 10. Is that, did I make that up in my head? Or was that something?
I don't know.
I
think that you could justify a decent return on investment at 10%. I mean, we may not get that money back, but somebody in our community will. The sales tax is still here. I mean,
Is there a percent in there right now?
No, there's not. There's no latitude for.
No, it's like,
Yeah, so that's
I remember
a new suggestion saying, should we allow for that? So let's say they should get five bids, for example, on a project, and you have 3 out of town vendors and 2 local vendors. You could say, okay, the local vendors are within 10%, we can take those, even though they're 10% higher than the out of town vendors. So that's what this statement would say.
and I'd be okay giving our local vendors an opportunity to try to get close to that. I mean, I don't want to scare away outside vendors, but again, I want to take care of our people. Hey, Clay Center said that they could get us this for this. Is there a way, I want to do business with you. Can you please make it to where I can do business with you? We cannot do that. Fair enough. But we've then gone out of our way as an organization to try to do business locally, which makes it easier to justify than why we went with an outside. Because it's not just that vendor that we're going to be talking to, it's somebody else saying, hey, why did you buy this from somebody else? Why did you buy this? Why didn't you buy this here? We've got a threshold. We tried to get it to match. We couldn't do it.
Would you see a difference in that for sealed bid items that are off a very specific set of specifications versus written quotes where we go and just get a phone call and say, hey, can you email me what you would charge for this?
I think,
Or would you think it would be better for both?
what would be a situation in which it wouldn't be good to do both?
Just the general rules that I grew up in with the construction and was trained in is that if it was with the sealed bid thing where you had a set of hard bid specifications, if you got the results in and then you went to another company and said, can you match this? That's considered bid shopping, and that's like illegal in the construction industry. I don't know if it's in state statute or not, but it's just like bad etiquette in that world. But if you were getting quotes where it's not a sealed bid thing, I mean, you're still working off a set of guidelines, you're still working off a set of criteria, but it's not this hard and fast, very strict, you have to stay within this box boundary rules. It might make more sense there too.
I have a question. Do we have a policy that actually says we have to take the low bid? Because we've taken bids that weren't the lowest.
It's lowest, most
For-
responsible.
Yeah, lowest most responsible bid is the general thing. Other than that, our purchasing policy is everything that's right here in front of us. This is the guidance that we have.
And even the lowest responsible bidders, sometimes only with certain contracts, right? I mean, that's not everything. That's only if it's stated as it's provided to for us. I mean, I think when we were talking about the alleyway, that was where that came up, where we didn't have much of a decision with going with somebody else because it's stated within that the lowest responsible bidder.
Right.
So that's, if I'm understanding Marcia's question, that's not a city of Concordia policy. That's an external policy that
Yes.
Yeah.
is
So like
over us.
with grants, if you work with state and federal money,
Right.
they're gonna say you have to take the lowest responsible bidder, but there's nothing in state statute for municipalities that says we have to do that.
So that makes me wonder if we need to put anything in that says if they're local and within 10%. I mean, do we have to put a percentage in there?
It could be just a guide without it being mandated. I mean,
So we could word it such that the commission reserves the right to accept
offer
bids from
preference.
local vendors up to 10% out of the,
Well, or
or just leave off the 10% like Marcia's saying. the state
leaves
reserves the right
preference to the
take-
commission
Okay.
to accept. Preference will be given to local bids. Without saying how much preference that may be.
Preference may be given to local vendors at commission discretion. I like that.
In terms of the numbers, Amy. I guess I think that 3,000 for department heads and 10,000 for city manager increases the threshold that would allow the flexibility and individuality that is warranted, but would also help ensure that there's the communication going on, that people know where things are. And even within that 10,000, I still would want to have some conversation about getting bids. I don't know how to set that metric, but making a $9,000 decision, I think there's still an importance to make sure that we're not, and honestly, not so much for you or not so much for any of the current department heads that we have, but any future staff member that there's a safeguard there that, no, I need to check with the city on this. I mean, but I also wonder what kind of purchase would you or the department heads need to make that would be in excess of $3,000 or $10,000?
I can give you an example. I can't buy a set of bunker gear now.
Mhm.
When I came here, a set of bunker gear for firefighters for $1,100. Now a complete set of bunker gear is almost $4,000. So I had a new guy walk in and Doug Mann tore his up on a fire the other day, just the pants alone are $1,500.
But I guess that would then, you could go to
Reserve.
Amy right now, and she could do it, that doesn't mean you have to wait for us, you could still get your work done, without having to wait for a commission meeting.
Right, because that could still be approved by the city manager.
Mhm.
We're just talking about money that you can spend without any kind of permission, right?
Right, yeah. So Jeremy, you want to give the example of your water meters?
Yeah, just the other day, I went into her office and a quote from it's Hersey meters. We put these in 2010. And we're finally having to start replacing some. So it was 53/4 meters and 51-inch meters. And it was $17,000. And we're replacing where from 10 to 20 a month now.
And so that would be an example of something that's not really a consumable supply because they last for about 10 years. They're a piece of small equipment that they're required for them to do an operation. Required for their daily operations. And so they may, if we leave the spending thresholds where they're at, for example, they would be coming to you twice a month to say, we need to approve a purchase of meters.
Why hasn't that happened yet?
Because they've been under warranty, so we've been able to send them back and have them replaced for free. Now they're out of warranty.
Well, it wasn't for free. It was
A lower cost.
reduced rate. Some of them were free, just depending on what was wrong with them. But now that the 10 years is over, it's replaced. And I think that's still relatively cheap than compared to a brand new system where you replace all the meters again.
Sure.
Because that was a huge investment. Amber, do you remember what that was? Like, it was over $500,000, wasn't it?
I don't know, I was gonna say 400 and some thousand.
So
So wouldn't that purchase fall into the being able to buy within your budget the items that had been budgeted for?
like
would that
equipment
not hit
reserve or
that?
something like that?
That,
Yeah.
Being able to purchase the items.
My maintenance, my equipment. It would be, I'll have to watch what I spend.
We should be in.
Say, well, I know, but I won't be able
My wife
to
tells
just
me anyway.
start replacing meters because they're high readings. They just better not work at all. And we read the town with the computer and just drive up and down the streets, and when they go dead, it won't send a signal. And sometimes it's a dead meter in the meter pit, but sometimes it's the antenna that's just dead. So we're still getting revenue, even though it's not picking it up, it still registers. He just has to go back and read it.
What about a limit that says something like 2,500, 3,000 at your department head discretion, 5,000 with city manager approval, and then 1,000 as a city manager before city commission approval?
So
That way, because I'm thinking that the number of times that you're buying, if you're hiring somebody, hey, we got Chuck Lamberts, he's gonna be coming on board, we're gonna have to get him some gear. Sounds great, right? So you still have that threshold.
Our biggest thing is it's when people tear. And we almost need them to, when we're down at Salina, just stop at Weiss and pick it back up and get it replaced.
But isn't that something then that could just be a quick phone call to the city manager to say, hey, we're tore stuff up, we're running through Salina. You okay with us stopping by, grabbing a new set of gear? Yep. I just think we want enough checks and balances, not at all to compromise your work, but just make sure that we're all on the same page. I say you all are on the same page with where our numbers are. And that if it's outside of that equipment reserve, or it's outside of that budget equipment, that there's that conversation that takes place.
yeah, I mean, it's doubling, it's doubling yours and tripling. So it's a good start anyway, and then, I mean, it doesn't prohibit us from going back and revisiting.
So then, Ashley, back to your point, yeah, we had added a section 4 to this policy under department heads. And there's a statement in there, says department heads are authorized to purchase consumable supplies required for operation of department, provided the purchases are within their department operating budget. So we're saying, like Jeremy's water meter example could fall underneath that. So then you guys would see the purchase on the appropriations ordinance, but that wouldn't be something that would have to come here for prior approval then.
That's how that's written right now, right? Am I reading
Yeah,
that right?
yeah, I mean, that's not how the policy is right now, that's our proposed in the policy. As it's written for 2004, all they can spend is $1,000.
Right, but in this new policy,
Yes.
the way that it is written
Yes.
would cover
Yeah,
his example.
That would, if you consider water meters as supplies, consumable supplies, it would.
Okay, so
Mm,
but they're not
God,
consumable
yeah.
supplies, they're equipment.
Yeah.
And now,
I think that's where you follow this real quick line, is bunker gear, consumable suppliers and equipment. Like where it was written before, all equipment had to come with specs and everything else to the city commission. You start really getting into this fine line, what's equipment, what's consumables? Is tires consumables or are they equipment?
They're equipment.
So if we gotta buy tires for a medic unit. You know, now with increasing that, and we could get her approval, but I mean, that's where we're starting to run.
Yeah.
Cause $1,000 now just to buy tires.
Well, that's why I think increasing that threshold is viable. I think that's justified. I think the amounts that we're talking about before, there's just a quick conversation either with city management. And then if it's the more significant the cost, then let's take a look at it. I'm in no way, shape or form trying to delay the work that you all are doing, or we have to wait for next city commission meeting before we get tires on the ambulance, right? Like that. that doesn't make sense.
And we've just been doing it, but this is just where it gets into that gray area. What's the consumables, what's equipment? I look at equipment as my big stuff, my trucks, air compressors, that kind of stuff.
So, right, so then is the paper and a copier, is that a consumable or is that equipment?
That's a supply and a commodity because it's quickly used up. I guess that's kind of
So
where.
is the speed or the frequency of replacement what would differentiate it? We had a debate today, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah. If it's cut and put on GBC bread.
What about a lettuce wrap? Is that a sandwich?
Nope, that's not a wrap, that's a wrap.
So yeah, that's the thing, but we could argue, I mean, these guys are really awesome at arguing both sides of the coin. And we have some really good robust discussions. It's a lot of fun.
Bunker gear should last 10 to 15 years. But if somebody tears it up, the door, does that just fall underneath the emergencies? Tires, they're consumably running down the road.
Most of these things though seem like they would have a relative schedule to them. Right, and that we could reasonably budget them appropriately. And then that's where I think that the number of times where we're gonna have to buy a set of bunker gear without prior awareness is gonna be so few and far between that it's not gonna necessarily inhibit the work that you're doing, but it also creates a safeguard in the budgeting processes that allows that conversation to take place, even if it's something on the way of, we're coming back from Lynchburg, you mind if we stop by in Salina, or hey, we need to grab a set of bunker gear, we're gonna be cruising through Salina, looks like it's probably gonna be about $4,000. Sounds good. Right, that there's still that check and balance that's in place to make sure that everything can be accounted for easily. And again, I don't have any issues here, but if we're setting policy, the policy applies. I mean, we did this last in 2004. So if you can guarantee that each of you will be here for the next 18 years performing the jobs to the current capacity, I'm fine kind of putting whatever numbers we need to put in there. If that's not the case, then we probably need to create a policy that isn't.
Okay, so your proposal is 3 and 10, then is that kind of what you guys are okay with then too? Marcia, Christie, and
I mean, I'd be okay with that threshold with city manager approval, right? To have like
Actually, I kind of like that idea because then you still have some flexibility.
that's what we're gonna do.
I have a well go down in the middle of summer, we have to have that well. It's 25,000 to get it going, but if it were to happen between commission meetings, I would have to wait 3 weeks.
See, I think that's where it would fall under one of those emergency things where we at the very least hold an emergency meeting or get some kind of relative consensus. That would be something that I think, yeah, we can't, as a city, we can't operate without a well. But even at that, in that same scenario, even if we increased the limits to the levels recommended by Amy, that still falls outside of it.
Right.
So there's emergency conditions here, and then we have to be really careful if we were looking for emergency meeting consensus, we have to be really careful not to violate common laws too. So we've gotta keep that in mind too, as we're doing things. So would you guys interpret under emergency conditions, purchase major items, and that's under daily purchasing? So in that scenario, would that be something that Jeremy could just do because he knows that we have to have it, or will we need to call an emergency meeting and get your prior authorization?
Just tell you the next meeting. Hey, I had a well go down. It's in the process of being fixed, or have an emergency meeting.
There's technically a line item in the budget for that.
Yeah,
It's
Oh.
budgeted
I was
every
gonna say,
year.
it seems like we've dealt with that before.
We have.
And you just got it fixed, didn't you? Or you sent it off?
Yeah, I think I had them coming and I put it on the agenda.
So I think with
It was delayed a little bit, not as bad as it could be delayed though.
I think that we could, with daily purchasing and under emergency conditions, again, just to help ensure the safeguard, that that if the department head and the city manager determine this situation to be an emergency condition, then you're authorized to access that budget however we need to put the fire out, so to speak. And so that way you at least have two stamps on it that says we both identified this as an emergency, which then makes it a lot more justifiable. Ultimately, the taxpayers say, well, why'd you do that, for whoever's watching and asking. But that safeguard's in place then to quantify that as an emergency condition, get the well replaced, and then we talk about it later. I think in a way that's just kind of triage work, right? Like, don't ask for my insurance card, it cracked open, just put me back together and then we'll chat. Although, I'll check that conversation, just let me believe that. Probably worth more to my family than me.
We do have one more section here too that we're proposing to add in here. So one of the things that's available to us as a public agency is to purchase items on state contract. And I know working at the school district and the college, we use this quite frequently. So the Department of Administration at the state of Kansas has purchasing agents that go through and they decide, I'm thinking computers was a huge one that we used, and certain vehicles were one that we used as well, that they would go through the process and say, here's the specifications. They would go out and take the sealed bids, and then they would come back with their lowest responsible bidder. They would post it online, and they would vet the contract with that, or they would enter into a contract with that vendor. And they basically tell us public agencies, if you want to buy this product, you can shorten your procurement timeline. If you'll buy this particular specification of item from this vendor, you can say your competitive requirements have been met by using this state, referencing the state contract number, and you can go. So in 2004, our purchasing policy does not allow for the use of that sole source vending or that purchasing contract using a state contract purchase. So what I'd like to add that in there to be able to have that flexibility to use that in a situation that we might deem appropriate for here. Also under sole source would be recognizing that there's certain things that we standardize on. So Jeremy just mentioned that the whole city is standardized on Hersey meters. If we got into a situation where we had 20 of them that needed to be replaced at one time, for example, we wouldn't necessarily want to go out to bid from several different vendors because we run the risk of possibly having two different kinds of meters now in town that take two different kinds of reading equipment, two different kinds of software interface, that kind of thing to have to maintain. So when we get down to the point where we standardize on something, we'd like to be able to just go back to that same vendor, still go ahead and get a quote, still follow the thresholds, but knowing that we're standardized on that vendor, we need to stay with that for greater good reasons, I guess. How do you guys feel about use of state contracts and then recognizing sole source purchases in certain instances?
Well, don't we do that in a way with the police department when we're buying vehicles from the highway patrol?
Yeah, that would be one example. When their used vehicles come up for immediate purchase and we have that opportunity, we have that money budgeted, that would be an example of sole source purchasing. Now, Rick used the other kind of competitive, just when he chose to buy new and he went and got some prices around from some different vendors there and ended up buying locally there. So yes, that would be an example.
I think in terms of equipment, it makes sense for us to continue. I mean, I think there's an efficiency there. We continue to use the same meter, so we're not trying to have multiple systems at the same time. I think in those types of situations, it makes a lot of sense. The only thing I would really want to be careful about with using the state list is still wanting to try to give preference to local vendors when and if at all possible.
So would it make sense to add a statement at the bottom of this paragraph that says, consider whether local vendors can be used or preference given to local vendors for certain items?
I would like to see that.
Is there anything else on this policy that you had questions on or that didn't make sense or that you would like to see added or taken away?
I'm glad you struck the vehicle and equipment purchasing. That always just seemed kind of micromanaging.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know what lawnmower they need.
You don't?
I don't. I don't even mow my own lawn, so.
the only concern I ever heard from a vendor about something in terms of specs, or that the spec sheet was, they felt that the spec sheet was specifically written for a very specific piece of equipment. So I'm not a car guy, but at one point in time, Ford's had 351s and Chevy's had 350s, right? So the spec sheet then would be written for a 351 cubic inch engine, at which point the Chevy dealership wouldn't have any chance to meet spec because they only were able to offer a 350 cubic inch engine.
So it's my understanding that when you're going out for bids on a specific piece of equipment, that you cannot do that. You have to write it generic such that more than one can bid. So I will share experience working in Salina. We did that. We bought small pickup trucks for the maintenance staff to use. The reason we did that was because they fit well on the sidewalks and on the slab playgrounds, and they fit well in the parking lots, and we're able to maneuver. We attached a certain size of snowplow to the front for snowplow removal. We actually specified the wheelbase on those to fit the majority of the sidewalks. And then whenever we had to build new sidewalks in or around the schools, we continued to build them to meet that specification for those trucks because it meant functionality. We ran into the same pushback from a vendor that said, when you do that, my mini truck is excluded. And when we explained to him, here's the functional basis of why we do that, then he didn't complain anymore. So I think it's similar to when you require something, when you require, say, a physical or agility requirement when hiring somebody, you can tie it back to a bona fide job description functionality, then it makes sense. I think as long as we can just tie it back to a bona fide job description or bona fide functionality, that makes sense. Otherwise, we shouldn't be doing that. Our specifications should be specifically broad, sufficiently broad so that more than one vendor can do that. They shouldn't be proprietary like that.
I think that'd be ideal. So if we need a 60-inch mower, me saying, well, yeah, but I can get you 2 30-inch mowers and it's the same thing. No, we need a 60-inch. Well, I've got a 59. Well, we'll consider that, but allow that range. But that's the only concern I've ever heard, and that was been a while now about our purchasing. In terms of specifications, I guess it is.
If there's no further discussion on this, then we will make some of these adjustments and then bring it back to you next time for consideration as policy. Thank you very much for talking through this tonight.